I see a few folks have come back again tonight. Welcome back, guys. We'll go live in about 8 minutes. "33 days from now all the way through November 2nd. Every single day." 23 hours and counting. Enjoy. So my company has agreed to, or has a program where they'll match a charity of your choice up to, they'll donate $250 a year. So you have to volunteer for the charity for 25 hours. Well, between pre-stream preparation, advertising, talking about what I'm going to do, posting the Reddit, creating and posting the Reddit thread, that whole 9 cents, I'm 25 hours just on game day on 11/2 alone if I just did that one day. But I haven't done this in a couple of years, and wasn't able to do it last year because of health reasons. And so I thought I'd come back and do it with, you know, a little bit of bigger of an event. Yeah, it's funny. I hadn't done this in 2 years. I come back and I do it for a week, and suddenly Twitch wants me to be an affiliate because I had followers from way back when. Yeah, it's a grab bag just so they can say they got a little stamp on you. Try and encourage you to keep streaming through their platform instead of somebody else's. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I'm not even sure I'm really going to bother with it. The reality is that I don't do this as a job. I don't do it for fame. I don't do it for money. I do it for charity. Yeah, I don't see myself doing the necessary legwork to what's the professional term here? Cultivate an audience. Not likely. Okay, let's see if I can remember where we were. Ha ha ha. At this point, it's all kind of a blur. So we've tested our drowning trap. We need to get weapon traps in the entry corridor. Get an archer squad assembled and training so that folks can see how that's done. Finally, we hope, import enough gold to finish off the wells. Actually, we'll probably get one. We'll be lucky to get one, and then maybe we'll have to do something else besides gold for the others since we don't have gold on site. Nobody seems to want to import it worth a damn. Well, we'll see, Goon. Past week, believe it or not, I've been having that conversation with the wife that I don't have pain, but I have the shock sensation from the neuralgia still. It's come back in the last week, and I'm hoping it's not going to progress back the other direction. But I don't have any control over it, so we'll see. So let's see. We got to get an archery squad. We got to finish the wells. We hope, because it'd be nice to actually do that on camera instead of just saying, "Well, okay, guys, screw it. I have to build it out of cheap shit." Probably should go ahead and pull that stuff out and wall that off. But I think that that's because way down here in the forges we haven't finished building up our smelters. So let's do that. All right. That'll allow us to do something brave like tell all the haulers that they can now smelt and watch the smelting tasks just get flung everywhere. Okay, so the confess is I haven't really looked into missions. I've read a lot about this crashes, this breaks, this is screwed up. So the reality was I wasn't going to get to missions on camera. I didn't figure. I have to look into those still. But as far as multi depots, we actually have multi depot at the moment. That's what we've got set up here. Now, in my case, it's primarily for flexibility. If something goes wrong, I don't know what that something would be. I can button up the merchants and protect them, allowing me to protect them from, say, a siege that comes in and for some reason I can't stop it outside the gates. Um, Realistically, that protection would be finite, but you can't keep them forever. But you could keep them safe for a bit and maybe give them a chance to sneak out after all the trouble had gone. So the truth is I only plan to use one of these realistically. We have three depots at the moment. Only two of them are only accessible by foot traffic at the moment, and the wagons can reach the one on the surface that we've been using all along. So the intent is we'll button this one up and remove it. We'll leave the dogs here as a precaution in case we open the sally port at some point. But this isn't intended to be a primary entrance long term. We're already a fair longer than I would have liked to have done it. Now, as far as two depots, what precisely were you referring to? I've done it in the past. I've not done it in the past. It just depends on my mood usually. But I think in this circumstance, it offers flexibility to you to be able to, if necessary, God forbid, I can always button the merchants up, let them go berserk, and then just leave them in there forever. Figure out how to flood it with water or magma later. I note that the room above this one is easily exposed, and I'm fairly certain you could drop a tunnel into this one as well. So, if necessary, we can extend our drowning reservoir and use it to deal with merchants. Now, realistically, you don't want to be doing that if you plan to keep good relationships with whoever you're drowning. So, buttoning them up and letting them go berserk or drowning them in place is a real good way to piss off the civilization responsible for them arriving. So, unless you'd like to stop getting trade goods and start getting raided, probably better to avoid it. Fisherman who's constantly getting. I don't know, dude, what's your problem? Oh, he needs a craft. I have something. I need to have something I can do that's worth something. Oh, I'm everybody's special little friend now. Okay, fine. So let's see. Crafts we want everybody to do. Uh, if we've done the main weaponsmithing jobs for our dwarves, a little weaponsmithing wouldn't hurt. We can always. Hmm. There's a few ways we could handle that. Let me think. And the easiest way is probably to give them pottery and let them go nuts. Because the reality is that right now all we're producing in terms of pots is pots. No, we're not making anything valuable. We don't care what the quality of the pots is. It's just used to store food and booze, and I don't care. We can sell them off en masse. That's no big deal. But we could set up everybody pretty much to do that who doesn't have a craft, and thereby get them trained on doing something. Fire, clay, and magma being infinite resources allows us to do this indefinitely without having to worry about running out of materials like we would with metal smithing or stone crafting or bone, wood, leather, cloth, you name it, finite resources. Sand and clay are drawn from the environment, treated as infinite, just like magma is. So effectively, that's crafts from nothing. We could set up a workshop, limit the skill down to relatively low levels. Since our main potters are at least skill 2 and nobody else in the fort has at least a 2, we could set the main workshop up to allow only somebody who has a 2 or better. Lock all the pottery jobs we currently have to that workshop and just turn pottery on everybody. And at that point, guaranteed, no matter what other workshop, what other skills they might have, sooner or later they're going to catch a pottery job, build something, even if it's just a clay pot, and then clay pots made out of fire clay are at least reasonably valuable. Kind of heavy though, so maybe we'll just see what we can make in the way of crafts. I've never heard of any problem per se, but what I will note is that the problem if you're going to call it a problem, is that you'll have a hard time getting them probably to use both depots without buttoning one of them up first. So if I wanted, I suspect in this case, if I wanted them to use the right-hand depot, I would be forced to close the left-hand depot before they arrived on the map. If I sealed it midway, they won't reroute. They'll try to get to the main depot and they'll complain that they can't, is my guess. But to be honest, I've never tried it. I'm not really worried about them using both depots at once or anything like that. I don't believe it's possible that you can really have a problem, although I've heard that you can have a depot or a set of merchants run long and the next set come in if there's a lot to load up and potentially collide in the hallways to hilarious effect. I mean, the reality is that our intake tunnel is one wagon wide. We don't have a two wagon entrance. So if wagons come in at the same time, somebody's getting screwed. There's no way to. I mean, realistically, I suppose you could do some theoretically do something with bridges and pressure plates, where once you pass a certain point, hell, I don't know. Still think you'd have to do it with levers because you'd have to make sure that the final caravan wagons were in. See, I'm trying to avoid stuff that's unstable enough that the precaution is save it before you do it, and then hope it doesn't crash on the way back. That's that's busted. Come on, guys. um, all of our military will get sidestep this by having stone detailing, since they're all engravers. Although they'll never necessarily get very good per se, they'll always have a craft in terms of smoothing something. If necessary, I can tell them to smooth the old mines before I seal them off, and just give them something to do to keep them occupied. Um, that means we need to take care of haulers, nobles, those kinds of folks who need something to do. Pottery makes a great alternative for them. I recommend it in the real world as well. For those of you who've never tried it, throwing on a wheel is a fantastically relaxing exercise. Now our hunters are all getting some skill in terms of tanning, leatherworking, bone crafting. The ones that don't have that yet are the ones that have just haven't had a chance. None of them are getting particularly good at it. They don't have a chance for one guy to monopolize the jobs, as it were. But they'll all go out. They'll do hunting periodically, and since they're set for crossbows, these guys will actually train as well. So we can set them up in a squad and leave them off duty. And so what I'll do is I'll use this basically as the junior league archers. These are guys who are going to get drafted into my archery squad, basically. We're at 7. I wouldn't go above 10 hunters in any fort. There's never that many animals. 7 is overkill, realistically, unless you're just swarmed with animals. It's not like RimWorld where you can send your entire, colony out to hunt and there'll be plenty of stuff for everybody to have a target. Okay, got fish cleaning around the board. Hunters have something to do. Fisherman was the original problem, and he has something to do. And then we'll come back and reevaluate. And we'll just go a little wider and throw in some additional kilns and a couple of glass furnaces. So I haven't actually saved the custom professions file. It's theoretically there. We'll probably see about exporting what I end up with when I'm done. We've been changing our professions as we go since I've been doing all this from scratch. Oh, right. And there was one other thing I was going to do. Those guys can smelt too while they're at it. I don't expect them to get good at it. I don't expect them to be fast at it, but this is not a job where quality matters. It's just a matter of time. So, rather than worrying about any particular dwarf being our master smith furnace operator, we simply spread the job out, throw in a lot of furnaces, and let a bunch of unskilled dwarves do it half-ass job of it and still produce the same products. And the sparring begins. Nice. The axemen have begun sparring. So, on that note, let's take a look at our military. So, our military is passable, starting military. Our hammer guys have just started to get hammer skill. Our spear guys, which we just started, haven't even had a chance to start getting the spear skill, really. We've got one guy who's really good and is going to have to teach everybody else pretty much. Um, and that was just fortunate. I didn't even pick him because he had it. I just selected a bunch of random guys as they came in a migration wave, threw them in the scale, threw them in the thing, and away we went. We've only got 2 men, but on the archery group, since I tend not to throw them in areas where they're going to suffer direct combat, and I tend to isolate them in events where they would be dangerous, females in the archers isn't necessarily as bad. Yes, yes, you still have the carries baby into combat problem, but at the same time, if you're treating your archers properly, they're not being exposed to return fire, and therefore they're not as exposed to danger overall. Plus, if I'm going to have a female on the surface in the role of, say, a plant gatherer or something, I'd rather have one that can plunk a snatcher with a crossbow than one that can't. And I really, really want Toady to finally fix the equipment bugs with hunters, woodcutters, miners. Please, for the love of God, Toady, make it work. I want my military to be able to run picks. And I mean properly run picks. Be miners and run picks without having to have two. Without changing over, without equipment mismatch. I want my axe squad to cut trees. Anybody know if they've got it fixed so they'll properly use ranged and melee weapons? Have your dwarves fire off bolts and then switch to a melee? My guess is no. All right. So once we get this mined out, and you'll notice that they're canceling jobs for the warm stone. That's okay. That's expected. Oops. Needs tetrahydrate. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What the hell? What are we complaining about here? Smelt tetrahydrate needs tetrahydrate. What is this? Phalerite? Oh. Well, we'll fix that. Zinc incoming. Zinc being lightweight isn't a bad metal to make bins out of if you're going to make metal bins. Cancels drink. Job item lost or destroyed. Where are you guys at? Somebody must have got to the booze before you did, you big fucking babies. Suck it up and change to a new bucket. Although I wonder, with 110 population, do we have... Yes. Yes, and to spare. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so not a problem. And remember, of course it's the tavern that's named the Chocolate of Skunks. Didn't we accept a performer? Maybe we were thinking about it. We didn't actually do it. I bet that's it. Okay, so we must not have accepted his petition yet. We do need to get a room up for him anyway first. This is me displaying goods stolen from the elf who died to the giant in the middle of my tavern because we can. Remember, guys, dwarven law is you die on our property, it's ours. All right, and then set of doors. We don't have doors. Okay, we need to queue doors. And I'm going to create a stockpile specifically right here for goblets. Never seen mercs work charge when they're locked behind fortifications. Well, considering I lock my guys behind fortifications, having them use multiple weapons isn't likely in the cards anyway. But it'd be nice if that were kind of implemented, because it's kind of a basic functionality for your military. I know Dwarven AI is anything but I and everything, including A, but still. So our guys will pull the last few bits of coal. Oop, oop, look over there. There be iron. All right, more bedrooms. Yeah, man, I got a great deal on a room in the Temple District. You idiot, they're all in the Temple District. Dispatch the military to exercise their craft a little bit. I have a dedicated stockpile for marble. I really don't need it to show up in here. When we start making steel, this stockpile right here will keep up with what we use. And if it doesn't, the solution is more wheelbarrows and more mining, not polluting this other stockpile. An enormous pile of zinc, and a small pile of iron. That ought to keep us for a while. It'd be nice if this told you more about them, or if you could probe them before you agreed to these, without having to try and find them first. And I suppose while we're at it, we should probably produce some quicklime. I never thought to do that. We'll use that to make parchments. That'll allow us that and potentially scrolls if we've got the right plants, but I don't think we do. Have to look and see if rope reeds can be made into paper. And we'll put in a library. Now, I know some of you are worried that, I've lost my love for Dwarf Fortress. That's not true. Thank you, dear. Thank you very much. And I want to demonstrate it by using one of my favorite techniques for dealing with a captured enemy. We snagged a giant. We can do lots of things with him. All sorts of things. But I prefer the classics. Yeah, it's going to take them a while to get there, unfortunately. Giants are heavy. So I was reading about a particular way to deal with book theft, a problem I hadn't really paid much attention to in previous versions. But in order to deal with it properly, we have to build two libraries and have one of them have no bookcases and tables outside the library location. This is a clever bit of reverse. This is a clever bit of dwarven trick making here. So let's make sure we've turned off cooking on anything we want to keep. I don't care about bayberries getting cooked away to nothing. Likewise, all the rest of these, I don't care. Cook them. We're good. Helmets I'd like to keep. Koi bushes. Don't care about ratweed. Or tomatillos. Nope, cook it all. We're good. They can't cook the booze fast enough to use it up. Okay, we've got a good supply. In fact, we've probably got an enormous supply of rock tallow now. Who wants to bathe in rock soap? Classics like For the Love of God, Montresor. But we're not going to be that cruel. We're not going to wall him up with a solid wall. No, 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 no. We're going to make sure people can walk by outside the fortifications and see him on the other side in his little pocket dimension cage forever. Long after our fortress falls, long after the dwarves have come to ruin, long after everything has been eradicated from the living world, that dude is still going to be in a cage, locked behind a wall, in the ass end of forever. So the answer, Northwest, is flexibility, but not really. Um, it allows us to pull off a couple of stunts in extremis if we have to. The way this is laid out, merchants will almost exclusively use this depot. In the event that we needed them to use the other one, we would literally have to lock this one up because otherwise they'll use this one. It does allow us to seal up the depot and potentially have berserk merchants in there and be on the way to kill them with magma while we're still trading in the other depot if necessary. And someone will be along momentarily to lock our little friend in until the end of time. If we just left the cage there, someone might open it. That would be bad. Now, theoretically, you could do something clever like rig him up to a lever behind a bridge, wait till the trolls and goblins came in, drop the bridge, open the cage, and let the goblin and the giants duke it out. But I'm a big proponent of slow, long term debilitating suffering. It's like a trophy wall that breathes. Think about it. There's a giant literally watching people go into the drowning chamber. Siege after siege after siege. He can warn them. He can tell them about it. They're not going to listen. They're going to go in anyway. Well, the good news is we can always, at any time, decide we want to pull him out of the wall and use him for something else. But while he's locked in that wall, He is perfectly safe and protected from everything else, and we are perfectly safe and protected from him. No berserk dwarves, no gremlins, no weird things can get to him and cause a problem. He's locked in good and tight. Locked down, baby. Going nowhere. You can lure enemies into a room using dogs on chains and bridges to expose and hide them. Basically, they'll try to kill the dog on the chain. They'll path to the dog on the chain. You just don't ever let them get to the dog on the chain, and they're yours to play with. Um, you could use two long pathways with two bridges leading to the same dog to keep a guy going back and forth between the pathways forever, trying forever to get to the same dog. Um, maybe with pressure plates and bridges. So we'll stash him there for now. Who knows? Maybe we'll get three more giants just like him. We'll complete the set. It's just like dwarves to hoard the wealth, man. That's got to include giants, right? How many human civilizations do you know that have a giant on display in the front hallway? If it wasn't all trap immune, believe me, I'd bury the entire map in cave traps and laugh the entire time. It'd be boring as fuck, but it'd be hilarious. Okay, how are we doing on bars now? I think we've got a good supply built up, or I'm hoping we do. Iron, in this case, is what I really care about. Okay, got a good chunk. How are we doing on trap parts? Take their trap components, melt them. And remember, the entire reason to make these and melt them down is twofold. One, it builds skill for our smiths. Two, because we're using trap components to do this, we're getting a yield higher than 100%, so we're actually generating metal slowly over time. As long as you use this method, it is theoretically superior to using pottery for this purpose to get everybody a trade skill. But pottery can be used to produce high value crafts en masse, and is a skill that if you have plenty of people doing it, you're better off having lots and lots of people than having just a few because you have to do all the clay mining. You can work around that by having kilns whose sole purpose is to collect clay, limit them to people who don't have the skill or who have it at a dabbling level or less, and then turn it loose so all your haulers run around and collect all the clay while your primary crafters do all the crafting. There's an interesting question I should look at. I don't know if anybody's answered. I wonder if the collect clay and collect sand jobs count as practicing a craft for purposes of filling the dwarven need to practice a craft. You did them at a workshop even though they weren't skilled jobs. And let's pay better attention to this one than we did the last one. What do you say, guys? I mean, I'm reasonably sure it's tracking which skill they use, so it has to be like a mutable skill probably to count as a craft. But I'm curious if the job itself must also be a skilled job. Making blocks is not a job you care who does it. It technically builds the skill, and he's stalled. What you need? Cloth. Cloth is going to be a fucking problem. Rough color is rough gems, bones, thread. That's a problem. Looks like maybe we need to revisit in the manager our process plants job. And if you're out there, Toady, a search function on this would be fantastic. 'Cause there's a lot of bits out here to be looking through. There it is, process plants. Still got the job, but it's probably not getting enough workshop time. Now, if our miner needs thread, he'll come along and grab it. If he doesn't, someone will be along shortly to weave this into cloth, and then that should meet his need. At that point, he'll go pick it up from there. Got to check to see if we actually have some bones available. Yeah, looks like we've got some bones available. That's good. Okay. Want to make sure we haven't consumed them all for bone bolts. It's got to be the cloth that's sticking him. Pretty sure we've got rough gems. Stone, bones, rough color is rough gems, more bones. We have plenty of those. Cloth, and I'm not sure if that's cloth thread or cloth. He may want silk and not plant cloth, in which case we're fucked because I don't have any silk and I have no way to get it, I don't think, except the trader. There's wool cloth. See if we can find some silk in this bad boy. Not seeing a lot of cloth there. Lots and lots of wool. Bummer. If he needs silk, he is totally screwed because we don't have any. Oh, I guess we can sell some of our prepared food. So let's see. We'll sell these 3 pots of prepared food. Yeah, you're good. Trading complete. And carry away a bunch of our crap cloth for one thing of food, because we really don't care. And apparently wool will work because our mood guy is on his way right now to pick up the cloth. So we're good there. He's got the cloth he needs, or at least in theory. Yay! So on the subject of cave spiders, our caverns are particularly dangerous. They're not as dangerous as they could be, but we have two forgotten beasts roaming around down there. One with a poisonous bite, one with webs. Neither of those is particularly friendly to dwarven life. They've been rampaging around there for a couple of years, screwing with shit. That's just magma crabs. Let's see. The forgotten cave beast is pretty well shredding stuff in the head. Eighth of malachite 178. So pretty sure that's like right now. Yeah, that's like today. So the forgotten beast is still rampaging around there right now. The other one is webbing. So constantly finds a target, shoots a bunch of webs at it, bites it on the head, and just continues to bite everything on the head until everything's dead. Not exactly the sort of fight I want for our dwarves. But regular cave spiders are actually a thing now. I haven't heard this guy trip, so what's he waiting on now? Oh, good, he's working. Oh, good. Yes, yes, good. I must have missed it. Sorry. So it used to be the case that you could only farm giant cave spiders. It is theoretically possible in the current version to farm regular, honest to goodness, vermin cave spiders. Um, it's not easy, but it's doable, and you will get an infinite supply of silk that way. Let's see. Calf, bull, ewe, donkey. Why are you all not getting butchered? What the hell is Auto Butcher doing? Auto Butcher, you're falling asleep on the job. Actually, no, that's not true. We should probably didn't set it up correctly. Uh, you're set to butcher, but you can't. You're set to butcher, and you want to. You're just we exceeded pults. Okay. So who's starving here? Bunch of calves will have to pasture up somewhere useful, so they can eat. But aside from them, I don't think we ever actually put the door on that thing. Gonna have the great Pult Roundup here momentarily. There's your random thought for the day. It's a pity Dwarf Fortress doesn't put a note in that guy's file. Was captured by dwarves in the year 178. So I was on the subject of unlimited silk. I was reading, and it is possible, apparently, in the current version, to use your animal trappers to trap cave spiders and then release them in a confined space, which you prevent cats from entry, which will allow the vermin spiders, if released in large groups, to breed in that confined space, believe it or not, and thereby produce a silk farm. But the downside is cave spiders still have a will make your guy dizzy bite, and it's apparently a permanent syndrome. So you want to limit your silk collection to a couple of dwarves who are basically going to be your designated sufferers at that point. Set them loose to do your silk farming. I encourage you to go look it up. It's not likely we'll get into it here. If we happen to puncture the caverns and get access to a giant cave spider, then I'll probably build a silk farm. But barring that, I'm not going to probably mess with the vermin type. This is a really weird way to build a library, so bear with me and I'll explain. So I checked the wiki, and it turns out that in order to prevent book theft, you have to actually set up two libraries, one for citizens and one for everybody else. Theoretically, we may have made this second library a little too big, but we'll see. So the outer library here is for our scholars. This is where people will come and congregate. This is where We'll open this to everyone. The inner library here is our scholars only, our people only. This will be where we'll store the books. Out here, there'll be writing material, places to write, but no books, nothing to steal. Books are in the inner vault, in the restricted section, Harry. Don't think I want to install that artifact in here. I think I want to put it in the dining room. Possibly the tavern, but I think I like the dining room better. Okay, so the outer library is everybody's welcome, no books, but you can write whatever you like and discuss any literature you've read in the past. Inner library is where we keep all the good stuff. Nobody in here but our dwarves. This is where the copies get made. This is where our people do their work. Yeah, I've got the sound on, but if it's paused, it's not playing sound effects. You should hear the whistling. Oh, those poor humans are going to be attacked by a were-lizard. So let's see how that went. Were-lizard misses, were-lizard misses, were-lizard misses, were-lizard misses, were-lizard gets pissed off, were-lizard misses, were-lizard misses, were-lizard misses, were-lizard gets blocked, were-lizard misses. Meanwhile, he's getting just absolutely annihilated. Miss, 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 miss. Pretty well just stomped him. Okay then. Thanks for defending the fortress, kids. We love you. Now take our trade goods and get the fuck out of here before something bad happens, would you? Just taking a quick peek at our prepared meal count. We are never going to run out of food at this point. Not realistically, anyway. Senjai, if it seems quiet to you, that's not because it's actually quiet in game. It's just because you died. That poor tigerfish. Poor, poor tigerfish. Once again, Toady, want to buy bow hunting with a line, please. Oh yeah, totally. Were lizard. Right to the head. You never had a chance, dude. Nobody else has even come close to dying like a dying by were lizard like you have. The humans just demonstrated the entirety of the were lizard annihilation plan right there. You didn't even survive to see the giant rock come down out of the sky and get just mauled by our dwarves. So I'm expanding the bar stockpile so that we'll have a little more space. It looks like we're starting to fill up our available stockpile, and I want this stockpile to pull everything that's upstairs down. So we'll expand it and have some additional stockpiles to take some of the overflow. Oh, let me think. You probably died in the third or fourth day, maybe, and then we caught the rock on the ground in like the fifth day. Oh yeah, you died early, man. Well, maybe you missed it. You died, man. Let's see. Who took your spot? This guy, and he hasn't complained yet about having an inferior office yet, so we're liking him. He hasn't ascribed us any horrifying mandates yet, so yeah, he's doing all right. We've got his stuff smooth, so now we have to actually add furniture to improve his office and his dining room. I'm good with that. I'm quite happy with the mayor having low ambitions. One of our fortress visitors was a fucking baroness after she arrived. Low ambitions is a good thing. Who knows? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow your nobility. So the dining room's up to snuff, still bitching about the office. Bitch, bitch, bitch. Okay, he's happy now. Yay! Mayor no longer going to go berserk for not having the right furniture. Speaking of furniture, let's go downstairs and check on the bedrooms. Our carpenter is slacking. Maybe we never made a job for beds, and I've been doing it manually this entire time. That was dumb. That's what I thought. No, you bunch of ivory tower academics. You do not get to keep the artifact. It's going to the dining room where it belongs. Chop chop. Come along. Pull it up. He is leading by example. You realize that he's the first mayor we've had that hasn't died. Crazy mandates would be a good way to get there. Put that artifact front and center right in the middle of the dining room. And this is our scheduled switchover for our military. Well, and presumably at some point, Toady will implement it in such a way that it will become personal property as opposed to fortress property, since apparently all dwarves are permanently communistic. We still don't have weapon traps because I'm still trying to grind up my skills a bit here. Slowly, the number of masterworks climbs. It's at moments like this where I kind of wish I did have a webcam because I wish you guys could see the cat making a perch out of my face. Okay, so our two squads are in here, training away. When off duty, bored archers may still make their way to the archery range for training. Oh, that reminds me, we'll need to set their squad up properly. Oh, good, all set up. I wish non-metal was an option here. Because I really don't care what metal or wood they're made out of. I just care that they're made out of wood or bone. I don't need them to be made out of wood. I don't need them to be made out of bone. It'd be nice to be able to just set them to non-metal and call it a day. But as I'm thinking about it, I think the only bolts I've manufactured other than wood are copper, and I expect to have to make copper from giant axe blades for the foreseeable future. No, this isn't even all that good of a fort. Come on now. Surprised that it lives. No. Not hard to keep a fort going for a few years. It's once you start getting past that that you'll start to run into problems when the stress system starts to stack up because you're not micromanaging every little aspect of every dwarf's life like you'd have to in the current version. Do not yet have my gold bucket. Do have my gold chains, though. Probably used the gold mechanisms earlier because I wasn't paying attention. Somewhere on the surface, there's a really valuable cage trap. fact, there's probably 4 really valuable cage traps. Yeah, okay. So from top to bottom, the entrance bunker that we're still currently depending on is our primary fortress entrance and exit, which is bottlenecked through a single 1 by 1 staircase into what is a wood processing area, was originally our entrance burrow. Off of that, we dug a stockpile to house cages and wood, and it's large enough that until we get to a huge number of excess cages or a huge amount of excess wood, we're not going to have a problem with storage. We dug this as a quarantine when Senjai got himself bitten, but he didn't last long enough to actually, make it to the quarantine and get walled in, so we never actually finished it. Underground crops, that is to say, crops that dwarves normally harvest. 1 floor up from that underground is our surface farming area, which remember we walled over and then built stockpile over the top of to keep the trees out. That links up to our fishery, which is connected to a fishing hut directly over the river, fishing through a grate. Back down below the farms, we have our primary food stockpile and processing area, along with our pastures, one for sheep, utility animals, birds, pigs. Below that, we have kitchens and stills. We could probably augment these, but realistically, we're running at 2,000 drinks and we probably got 500 prepared meals already. I set it up to 500 just to use up some of what we've got. We're running at 500 prepared meals currently. More than enough stockpiles of food at this point. I could disable the farms and put the farmers to use doing something else, and it would be probably a couple of years before we finally work through our backlog. Hospital with incomplete wells. We have the blocks, we have the chains, but we do not yet have the buckets. I want these done in gold just because it's valuable. There's no particular reason to do them in gold except that I'm being a persnickety bastard about it. Realistically, if you wanted to do this in a real fort, you probably want to do this fairly early. We've kind of been putting it off a lot longer than we should have, especially with our hospital actually having seen use. But we're getting by, so it's okay. We're okay, not ideal. In a fort where I was doing this quickly, fuck it. A stone block, a wooden bucket, and a pigtail rope is 3 of the 4 parts you're going to need for your well. Throw in a stone mechanism and you're done. It's not the most valuable well, but a well is a well in terms of function. I'm just being, icing on the cake about it, and I'm doing it in gold because I can. That well is supported by a rather large reservoir with a drain in case the system needs to be removed. This is a raising and lowering drawbridge under here. Connected to the river through a U bend, which is right here, up to the surface, which is also where the connection for our drowning trap on our primary entrance is. Outside the hospital is the primary entrance to the fort, our barracks and tavern, the common rooms where we spend a lot of time. So our hospital is currently doubling as a dormitory, but we're currently expanding bedrooms to get out of that. This is a stockpile we haven't finished. This is our archery range, barracks, and tavern with a couple of rented rooms, a staircase up to some additional rooms above it. This could be expanded in the event we wanted to run a bigger uh, sleepover palace, as it were. A little further south from there is our primary entrance with our drowning trap, tunnels downstairs to the reservoir drain. This tunnel is down to the drowning chamber drain. We are going to install a serpentine arrangement of weapon traps here to force wagons to pass through the serpentine, while anybody who wanders through that isn't a wagon is going to get themselves diced into little tiny pieces and then stockpiled in a refuse pit. 2 depots, so we can, if necessary, wall in a group of merchants and let them go berserk, and then release them into the weapon traps, or release them into the goblins, or just leave them in there forever. Whatever comes to mind, no big deal. As we continue down through the fortress, This is our dining room with our main stockpile, eventually to become overflow, nobles' offices, lever complex, and catacombs. The levers on the left have not yet been linked, the levers on the right are all taken. This entrance room is designed to house a chain and a dog, although we haven't done it yet, for the express purposes of detecting any gremlins that might enter the fort, sneak past all of our dwarves, and somehow make it to the lever complex in the middle of the crowded dining room. Since dwarves hang out at the tavern now and not just in the dining room, this is a little less optional than it used to be, but it's still pretty optional. You'd have to have a pretty damn clever gremlin get past all the dwarves to that point. Realize there's a lot of staircases with a lot of dwarves having visibility on the staircases all the time. Below the dining room is stockpile for prepared meals, uh, exterior library, interior library vault, mines, which we haven't closed off yet. This is mining tunnels we haven't closed off yet. Gem cutting and encrusting workshops, mason's workshops, stone stockpile, and a couple of mine areas we haven't closed off. Quarry, mines. Notice the difference. This case we wanted stone, so it's bulk, volume. Over here we were following the vein of minerals because that's all we cared about. Craftsdwarf's workshops and mechanics workshops, cloth and leather processing, temple and bedrooms, some completed, some not, some smooth, some not. This is our dyeing and soap making workshops. Caverns, 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 caverns. Something we haven't finished yet, 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 etc., etc. Caverns, 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 caverns. All the way down to stockpiles for bars and arms and armor. So this is arms and armor and bars. And then we're going to set up, these are additional stockpiles for bars, and we're going to pull some of the extraneous bars off to the side to house them. We have so many at this point that just storing all our bars is going to start to become a problem if we don't. Below that is raw ore stockpile for the ore we've mined for our forges, which are directly below that. This is all of our forge area. Yes, we're running purely on magma forges at this point. We no longer require fuel except for the manufacture of steel. Now, we haven't finished expanding this because it keeps getting disabled by the warm stone job, but that should be the last time we have to mine it again. It should be good from here on in. We will have to dig small channels to handle magma for our additional workshops because these are far enough out that the magma doesn't come all the way up that far. Clay stockpile. And then that's basically it. This is the bottom of the world as far as we're concerned at the moment. We actually do, in fact, have, you can see it right here, an adamantine vein that was directly adjacent to where we just happened to dig. I don't even think we saw this one originally when we were digging. There's another one over here. There's a third one down here. I want to say that we saw a fourth one, but don't quote me. There's at least three within easy striking distance of where we're located. And this one, at least one of those, probably goes clear up to the caves in terms of verticality. It doesn't look like the one we're adjacent to does, but one of the others probably comes up to the caves or nearly to. So plenty of adamantine when we get to that point, but we're not there yet. Keeping a fort going is not really the problem. I mean, in the current version, obviously, if you run it long enough, you're going to run into stress issues. Like I said, unless you're micromanaging your dwarves, long term, you're going to have your bad thoughts stack up. Now, if you stack in enough good thoughts, you'll offset that. But Toadie's already come out and admitted as much. The stress system is not functioning properly. Dwarves are slowly and steadily being driven insane. One of the things that we will really run into that we haven't hit in this fortress is siege cleanup. Apparently, dealing with all the body parts from all the sentients really pisses your dwarves off over the long term. Keep in mind, in prior year forts, you can go back and look. In my prior year forts, all of my dwarves would have been well out of this fine category. They'd all be sitting way over here in the green category. I'd super, super happy. That doesn't really happen anymore. Dwarves moderate away from the extremes, at least they're supposed to, back towards fine. Now, normally that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing to have. The problem is that in the current version, they're fine, and I'm running a fortress with a dining room that's got artifacts in it. Everything's smooth, or everything will be smooth. They're still not going to break fine for the most part. There's enough negative thoughts without seeing to every aspect of your dwarves' lives for them at the current moment that running your fort above this level is hard. Now, that doesn't sound bad because, after all, fine is fine, right? What was it they said in Deadpool 2? Fucked up, needy, insecure, emotional, right? Yeah. So our dwarves are going to go do siege cleanup. Well, you figure get a siege runs across your weapon traps. It's 40 goblins come in and it's 400 body parts going out. Your dwarves have to come in and pick that mess up, walk through that charnel house, wade through that blood, pick up those teeth, pick up those body limbs, pick up those severed heads, drag them off to the refuse pit, and dump them. And that's a massive hit to their mood. And they're already just barely at fine in this fort. Now, this isn't ideal by any means. This fort isn't perfect, but this fort ought to have reasonable solidity in terms of its operation. Food stockpiles are going to last for years. We have a functional, sizable militia. All of our dwarves' primary needs are being met. Bedrooms are literally on the way. Bedrooms will be done, in a matter of days, as soon as I can get the carpenters off their asses with the new supply of wood. Um, it's we have temples, we have a library, we have a tavern, we have all the basic needs met. We have instruments, we have dance floors, we have everything I think at this point except written works to entertain yourselves, honey and mead for variety's sake. Uh, Poke Kleinadev, he's got a. I'll bet you he could point you to where he came out and told you. I'm not saying it's completely busted beyond salvage. What I'm saying is players who have been familiar with the game and who run their forts for a longer period of time than I tend to, because I'll take a look at a fort like this and go, yep, this is well secure. The only question is whether I want to forcibly kill it by leaving the drawbridge open long enough or not. Um, if you're running your fort for 30, 40, 50 years instead of 6, 10, suddenly long-term duration of thoughts matters. People are saying, for example, that rain has the propensity to change dwarven attitudes, dwarven personalities fairly completely. We're getting rained on by human blood, so you might be inclined to overlook that. But I mean, people are saying that about regular rain. Well, I've got a lot of dwarves. They do a lot of hauling. They go up on surface and cut trees. I don't expect that my dwarves do all of their wood cutting indoors. And if that's the intent, then I'm going to have to radically change how I approach my caverns. We're going to go in hardcore with blocks into cavern 1 and just swarm an area and wall off an entire cavern layer if we have to. That shit will get crazy in a hurry. We'll have plenty of wood if we do that. When we do Glacier Fort, we might have to. Importing wood will be necessary, but I mean, at that point, if we don't have a way to gather wood, got to import it and got to get it from the tree, got to get it from the caverns. You can make a waterfall, and a waterfall will help. I don't know that a waterfall will completely offset it, and obviously, doing your waterfall in the middle of your staircase has its own problems. Although, I have debated punching a hole all the way down the center of the main staircase and running the waterfall right down the center of the staircase with a ring of staircases around it. I use Therapist extensively. I don't play the game without Therapist. Period. Full stop. End of story. I used the in-game mechanics for Dwarven labor management for about a day when I first started, and then immediately said, "This is crap. This interface is terrible. OMG!" I could not believe it. This is a 40-year-old man looking at this and going, "Oh my god, how can I possibly play this game?" There are people who do it, but if you ask them, a lot of them basically set their labors up and they don't touch them. They just let them run, like the dwarves are on autopilot at that point. And that's fine if that's the kind of game you're playing. You don't care about access to dwarven labors at that point. But if you intend to manage and relocate dwarves, mass assign dwarves, uh, I mean, you've seen a migration wave. I'll pull an entire migration wave and assign them immediately all to the hauler profession, solely that I've got them assigned to something useful. Then go back and pick through them for useful talents at a glance in a spreadsheet. If you did this with the regular in-game mechanics, you'd be individually going into each dwarf and looking at all of their skills individually, deciding which ones you wanted to and then either writing it down or whatever method you did to compare them, because you'd have to go through them all to know which ones were good and which ones were just middling for that wave. Or you'd basically have to assign them basically whatever their best skill is, that's what they get. Um, and if you decided to reassign them on MASH, you'd have to find all those dwarves, manually go in. It's problematic. The interface is not designed for the kind of fluidity that you can get from Therapist. End of story. I'm not going to bash on folks by, yes, but you must make it multi-layer. That is to say, it used to be the case in V31 and prior to multi-tile trees that you could dig one layer of soil out and basically treat it like a forest level that would never been exposed to sunlight, and that was fantastic. I never went to the surface at that point. You could seal the fortress up and get all your resources from a single soil layer that you yourself excavated. That's pretty fucking hard to top when you get down to it. But with multi-tile trees, a single layer isn't large enough to house them. You'd have to dig it several levels deep. Our caves here are one, two. This is just above this one tree here. 1, 2, 3 levels for that tree. Then there's 4, and this is still a tree here, all the way up. So there's that tree next to it is 1, 2, 3, 4 stories high. You'd have to be willing to dig chunks of terrain out multiple levels deep, and it's doable. It's certainly doable. You have the labor. If you do it pretty much anywhere, you're not going to have enough soil to do it exclusively in a soil layer, which is going to necessitate irrigation. So make sure you understand how pressure works, because you're going to have to flood your tree farm with water at least to the level of about 1 all the way across to create mud, and then allow it to grow cave moss. You can see how that works in an irrigated farm, although we didn't irrigate this because it was soil. This is all cave moss. All this colored patchwork here is cave moss growing just like it would in the caves. You can artificially do that by excavating down to the stone and then irrigating it once to create mud. On Steam, I think they've said they're going to use a particular tile set. You could go out to KitFox's website and figure out what they're going to use. I want to say they have figured out that they have a particular tile set or combination tile set that they're going to use. It's not going to be this one. This is the one I cut my teeth on, as it were. This is the Phoebus tile set that I've used for years. I've looked at others, and there are several good ones out there, and my monitor is now large enough that I can actually uh, maybe use a slightly bigger tile set than this and get away with it without having to zoom in or zoom out, I mean. Oh, I don't think they've said, but realistically, if they intend to do it anytime soon, Toadie's going to have to figure out which feature set he's going to add or have or freeze, and then he needs to do a serious bug fix pass over it before he releases it on Steam. Uh, Call it my unprofessional gamer opinion, but the folks on Steam are not going to tolerate a product for purchase that's cavalier about broken features and functionality in the same way that people paying donations for a product they like are apt to. there is a certain expectation I feel that comes with I am releasing my product for sale that does not attach when you are saying I am releasing my passion project for donations. But I think that with the exception of a couple of major systems which are currently not functioning the way they are, if Tony drops the next major release and immediately turns back to fixing up the most major bugs in all of the systems that have been released since, say, V34, that Dwarf Fortress is not so rough that it can't be released successfully. It's by no means the roughest product out there. Good God, I've played some absolute stinkers on Steam. And I think as long as care is given to when releases are done with respect to bug fix passes, so that Steam is less of an experimental branch and more of a stable, then I think that there's a potential for success there. And I do want to see Dwarf Fortress and its Steam release do well. Make no mistake, I don't want to see the game suffer. There you go. I wasn't sure if it was two or more. I didn't know what the minimum was. I just knew that you'd have to dig it out several floors. You can't use one anymore. It used to be tree farms only had to be one story tall. Two doesn't seem like it would be that bad. Realistically, on this site, we've got enough room that if I go up to one floor below the surface so that I'm not even above, not even in danger of tree falls, if I go one down, that's soil, that's soil. So I could dig out a two-level tree farm, say, up here, and have a small area in-house to harvest trees. Fingers crossed. I want it to do well. I want it to be stellar. I suppose we ought to get rid of him. He's clouding up our drawbridge. Okay, guys. It is after 10 o'clock. In fact, it is nearing 10:30 rapidly. So we're going to wrap up day 8. We still need our weapon traps. In fact, let's see where we're at on stocks. I may just go ahead and start using regular iron blades instead of having to wait on the Masterworks. Yeah, that's enough for now. Okay, we can get started at least. So, and we just crashed. Fan fucking tastic. That's twice now, and I'd love to know what I'm doing that's causing that when it happens. Both times it's been tabbing in and out of process. I think at this point, because it's after 10 o'clock and I'm getting ready to log off anyway, we'll just call it here. But that's not exactly how I wanted to end the session. And it'll pick up with wherever our last save was, and we'll have to figure out where that was and pick up with what we left off with. Right, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Dwarf Fortress is one of the most moddable games you're ever going to play. It's easily up there with RimWorld. Everything except the most basic systems, like pathfinding, is editable, and even pathfinding is alterable. There's no other game out there with the level of functionality or depth built in that Dwarf Fortress has. Where it tends to be rough is that features tend to come in terms of what's interesting and not necessarily in terms of a roadmap per se, in the sense that once they're good enough, they tend to be good enough for years and not necessarily good enough until the next version when, major bugs are fixed. There are military bugs like the multiple uniform issue that have been hanging around for many, many moons. I really wanted to do well. I hope Tony is paying attention to this as a one shot at the king kind of situation. Oh, it's definitely not overheating. Oh my god. This this box I built, trust me, there's enough fans in this thing it could cool an aircraft carrier. But and yet somehow when I'm tabbing in and out, I'll see dwarf therapist pop up and go, "What's your PID?" because it's gone. Definitely not an overheat on the laptop. And this rig will run things far more demanding than Dwarf Fortress at whatever, resolution or CPU use I want to throw at it, no problem. But it's not bad. It's not bad realistically. I'm not sure that I'm not doing something like tabbing out of the window at the same time I'm accidentally hitting the window key. I'm trying to catch where my hand is when it occurs. The window key alone shouldn't do it, but it's possible that the two processes trying to come to the front at the same time it argues with the window key might be causing some sort of race condition against the OS or something like that. Draw a call to a window that doesn't have focus, that kind of thing. All right, guys, I'm not seeing any questions, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and call it for this evening. We will pick up again tomorrow at 8 o'clock for day 9 of our 33-day series. Remember, I'm doing all of this for charity. None of this is for me. It's all for the people who need to learn how to play Dwarf Fortress or want to learn how to do something, and for the kids who need it and are sick. Down below the stream here, if you take a look, you're going to find a donation link, which will link you to my Extra Life donation page. I collect none of this money for myself. It all goes to the kids. The whole purpose I'm doing this is for charity, guys. Please, if you can, please donate to the folks who need it. Remember, those of you who aren't thinking that you might benefit from this, about 35 years ago, I was a patient at one of the hospitals that I am now representing. If I wasn't helped then, I wouldn't be here today to do this. So this is quite literally giving it back. I'll head out and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for showing up and I'll see you then.